For our first devotion on Philippians, I thought it'd be quite interesting just to take a little bit of a different approach. Rather than jumping straight into Philippians, I wanted to have a little bit of a look at the context of Philippians, because I think that can actually give us some interesting insights and also challenges around Philippians. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, Philippi is a town in Greece, and actually was a hill spot. It was a fortified city and overlooked the coastlands. It's got quite a fair bit of fame. We have a lot of stuff in Acts as to when Paul visited Philippians. In fact, in Acts 16, 23 to 30, you'll see the account of when Paul went to Philippi. And as a result of the preaching that he did over there, he was thrown in jail for a short time anyway. The book of Philippians, though, was actually written while he was in prison, yet again, in Rome, in house arrest. And that's actually quite an interesting one, because house arrest is not quite our sort of concept of house arrest, although it would have been very, very different from being in jail, which it was previously. House arrest meant that he basically was chained to one of the Praetorian guards 24/7, and he was in Caesar's household. This actually gave Paul quite a few opportunities. He was able to see people, meet them, talk to them, and they would bring him food and clothing. But also, he had a captive audience. So this captive audience was one which actually, for the Praetorian Guard and for those that he was chained to, provided them an opportunity to learn about the gospel. And he refers to this period of time in his letter in Philippians, and so hence it's important to understand this. So in Philippians 1:12 we see Paul refer to, he says, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that my circumstances here have turned out for the best." It's turned out to see the progress of the gospel. In Acts 6:25, we read, in fact, of where Paul was for that short time locked away in Philippi, and he led the Philippian jailer to Christ. Now, this time in prison for Paul, he was very accustomed to that. But I am left with the question: what would we be like in that sort of situation? How would we respond? Would we be okay about that? What would we do with it? Would we whinge and moan and complain to God? Paul's response was quite different. He actually saw it as an opportunity to do something very, very different. In other words, to be who he was in Christ. I want to ask you a question, a bit of a personal question, I guess. Are you in prison? Now, you may not be in a physical prison, but I wonder if, as a result of past experiences or hurts or emotional issues, whether you've put yourself in a prison, whether you've put yourself into a position where you feel that you can't get out, whether it's through your own decisions or the decisions that others have made. It's easy for us to feel that we have been caught up in a situation where we have no control. One of the things that Jesus said in Luke 4:18 was that he came to free the captives, in quoting Isaiah 61:1. Jesus will do that. He will free the captives. But as with Paul was in prison for a little while, although he didn't die in Rome, which is what he was expecting to be executed, but he didn't die for some 6 or 7 years later. But Jesus says he came to free the captives. If you're in a position where you're feeling captured, bound by whatever, whether it's emotional or other circumstances, then I encourage you to think and reflect on the example of Paul. And as we go through Philippians, I trust that you can actually get Paul's message in Philippians and see that as a way of understanding how he dealt with his physical imprisonment, but also how he discovered freedom in Christ. So the other one was that Lydia was a lady who was first converted in Acts 16:15, and she was actually a dealer in purple cloth. Now this purple cloth was made as a result of Tyrian purple marine shells. They were gathered in their thousands and cooked in massive pots for days on end and formed this really amazing purple which royalty used. And she was a dealer in this cloth. She was the first person to become a Christian. And what happened was that we read that she was actually worshipping God. And as a result of that openness to God, Paul met her. It's amazing how circumstances can bring people into our pathway. We need to be open to hearing what God is saying and having those encounters with others that may be very unexpected. So, as we journey through Philippians, I trust that you find it a book of freedom and not only joy, which is what Paul emphasizes, but also some challenges as well, and some opportunities for you to appreciate and to maybe wrestle with and maybe also explore more about your faith in Jesus. And I also leave you the challenge too about sharing the gospel with those that you come across in the most unusual circumstances. Thanks very much.